have like a Q&A session with the kids after you're done speaking and kids say the darndest things kind of thing?
It depends. I mean, usually they're on such a tight schedule, but yeah, for sure. I mean, just looking out, just the 5-year-olds at the beginning of the school year, it's just disgusting little things. Lots of just the booger stuff happening. And,
oh, sure.
And then also they're very used to farting. Like this is a big thing for them. This is very part of what it is. So that led to one of the days. I'm usually on a stage in front of 300 or 400 kids, and they're all sitting on the floor. But sometimes I go in the classroom and do a classroom visit. And so here's a note to any beginning storytellers working in schools: stay away from the school lunches. Right. So I had the bean burrito at the school lunch, and I know where this is going. And I was in front of 5th graders, and I'm standing up next to they still had an old slate board. So there's this green slate board behind me, and I'm just, it just happened. Couldn't help it. And it echoed off of the board, and there was no denying where it came from. And I had to stop and look at everybody and like, what's going to happen? And I said, okay, everybody, I just farted. And they just started laughing. They couldn't help it. And then I was able to, because of my knowledge of story, I said, which reminds me of the story from the Arabian Nights of the worst fart in the world. And I go into the story, and it was a perfect segue into the story. One of the most embarrassing moments as a performer became one of the a moment that these kids never forgot.
That's awesome.
And got them excited about the Arabian Nights. The librarian told me a couple weeks later, I haven't been able to keep the book on the shelf. I've ordered a bunch of Arabian Nights.
Is there really an Arabian Nights story about the worst part of the world?
It is. It's fantastic. It's not in a lot of the collections. So basically, a guy's going to get married, and it's beautiful wife and beautiful family and huge party, and everything's ready. They're just about to say vows. And he had some of the chickpeas earlier. And right before he's going to say I do or whatever they would say, he farts, and it is horrible. Oh, it's horrible. It's so bad that his family is just shamed. He is driven from this wedding, and he is driven out to live in the desert for 50 years. And finally, he's like, you know what? It's been 50 years. I think they will have forgiven me. He comes back into town. Nobody recognizes him. And he's listening. Oh, maybe they have forgotten. And then somebody says, yes. It's been 50 years since Alcine Saman had his famous fart. And he goes back out and he dies in the desert. So this is...
yes, of all the stories that could have said, it wasn't exactly like a guy walks into a talent agent's office. It could have been a lot worse.
That's how I lost a couple auditions, actually.
Scheherazad's Aristocrats.
Yeah, love it.
Oh, my God.
Also on the road, I sometimes am treated incredibly. I'm always treated very well, but sometimes like, hey, we don't have a lot of money. Do you mind staying in a house, or you know what I mean? And a lovely couple in Arizona just had 15 cats and just covered in cat urine. I just performed in cat urine the whole 5 days. They just got into my luggage, and there's no washing that out of the clothes. So we all have some of the horror stories of being on the road with that.
That's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
So, what would you say? Do you have like a worst gig ever, or else a worst? Like, if you can think back to it off the top of your head, out of your catalog of tales. Like a worst experience story that you could share with us.
There was a festival that I definitely won't name that was just incredibly not well organized. The sound system was terrible. Very few people came. They didn't pay, and then when they paid, the check bounced, and they finally paid a few months later, and it was like, oh man, I never need to do that festival again. So about a year later, I get a call from a really wonderful storyteller, very kind of a mentor of mine. He's got a bunch of books, and he's won Grammys for storytelling. And he's like, hey, I got a call from this festival. It's the exact same festival. And I was about to say, like, oh, that's a disaster festival. He said, but they said you were going to be there, and I love hanging out with you. So I said, oh, wow, that's amazing. I guess I'd love to go with that if you're going to be there. And then there's another person who was there. Then the three of us are there, and it's again awful. It's even worse than the year before. And this guy's looking at me, and we're looking at this other lady, and we're like, well, why did you do this? And she said, well, I got a call, and they said Antonio really wanted you to be there.
Oh man.
And Bill got a call and said, and then she got a call that Bill really wanted her to be there, and they were just lying.
Wow.
And it was
that's essentially how we booked you today.
Yeah. So that was weird to be in the kids' educational world, to be sort of lied to in that way. That kind of stuff.
Bizarre.
Wait, I'm sorry, Kevin. Who was the draw? Supposedly.
Bill O'Reilly.
Bill O'Reilly.
He backed out at the last second.
No. Yeah. And then another. So there is a Cuban tradition, or in my family specifically, of when you go to eat with somebody, you eat everything they put in front of you, and then you prove that you like it by asking for another plate. So, which is, in my family, is usually great. We have amazing cooks in my family, but my mom's family, the cooks are not so good. So so I showed up at some house, and there's a lot of things I don't want to eat before performing for different reasons, but the food just kept coming and coming, and then the drinks came out, and the guy would not let me leave before I did like 3 vodka shots of some concoction he did in the back, and so that's a little bit of an occupational hazard as well. But yeah, it's kind of it's interesting.
Wow. So let's see. I was going to ask also about. Do you have like a worst, just awful tale? From like favorite, not necessarily audience experiences, but like a worst moment in life that might still be funny. I mean, without not asking you to break out the ultimate tragedy or anything. But.
Well, so. So there was this one of my favorite shows that I wrote actually was about meeting my first wife and how we met and married and courted and then ended up getting divorced. And what that became, it's funny. One of the things that I try to do in my stories is to find the humor in all these situations. So that's the story that is running on KCET right now. It's a 13-minute version of the 80-minute solo show.
Oh, wow.
That solo show was called The Next Best Thing, and that ran for a number of years around the country. It became the show that won I won another Fringe Award as well, and I won a festival off Broadway, and really just like meeting the love of my life. It's funny, I was just talking about this. When we were thinking about getting married, we went to a counselor to just kind of figure it out. And the counselor said, well, there are 9 things that you really want to have as a couple. And she's like, you want to have you want to be on the same page, finances and where you want to live and your job. And we're like, yep, no, that's not us. You want to make sure you have a good physical connection. Yeah, we have a great physical connection.
1 out of 9's pretty good.
1 out of 9's not bad. So we went forward. In some ways, like, in one of the reasons I think that show was successful was most people have had their heart broken, and most people have broken somebody's heart. And so one of the things that had happened was, we had met in Chicago, and I moved to New York, and New York was really good for me. And she's like, I got to move to LA. I want to be an actor. I'm like, hey, I guess LA can't be that hard. I should go to LA too. And basically as we came out, the pull of the being a Hollywood actor was too much for us to handle, and so then it became like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm here, and LA was not, and maybe in some ways is still not necessarily known as a solo performer town. This is a town where a solo performance is a guy who's trying to get an agent, right? I don't have an agent, I want to do a solo show. Whereas in Chicago or New York, let's see a solo show, let's see what's going on. So I was really for about a year was unmoored, right? Just trying to figure out like, oh man, I'm here. I have no relationship. There's no career here. And so, the great thing that came out of that was I started writing even more. I started writing, I'm typically about 3 or 4 years behind the actual event. So it took me about 3 years to live through that. And again, it's like there's a saying in Spanish, no hay mal que por bien no venga. There's nothing bad that something good doesn't come from it. So, it's bad that Castro took over Cuba. It's good that you came here, is part of the family story. And if I never, I ended up meeting my wife now, and we have 2 children, and I never would have had those children if I didn't go through that terrible breakup, right? But it was odd to be single in Los Angeles at the time. This is sort of it was for sure the internet was around, but this is all pre all those dating apps and stuff like that. And one of my guys would try to take me out. Let's go out. Let's get you back on the horse. Let's get out there. And he was coaching me. My friend Derek, actually, he's like, all right, listen, girls don't like to hear about your sob stories. They don't want to hear about it. They just want to have a good time. So just make sure so he directs a lovely woman over towards me, and she's like, hi, who are you? What's your name? I'm like, my wife left me. I'm so sad.
Little icebreaker.
Yeah. So he's like, you can't do it. You got to be calm and cool. And then, there's another lady I met. She was, just hanging out, and she says, it's the same thing. I couldn't help but talk about it. I'm like, oh man, I got dumped, and this is so sad. And what did I do wrong? And she's just listening. And she says, you know what you need? You need just a one-night stand. You need a woman who's just going to take you home and just take care of you. I'm like, wow. She's like, yep. You just need somebody like me to just take you home. And I'm like, wow, yeah. I wonder who I'm going to meet somebody like that.
Oh, no.
For 10 minutes, she's dropping hits.
Someone in a blue dress, drinking a gimlet.
Somebody right in front of me right now. And it was like 30 minutes later, like she left, and my friend came back. I'm like, yeah, she kept saying this, and he just started laughing. He's like, and then I was
you
like,
schmuck.
Oh my gosh. So that was pretty bad. But eventually again, it's like it led to this thing that was better, and and obviously it didn't work for a reason. There was lots of things that I had problems with in the relationship she couldn't deal with, and in some ways out of this pain can come some art or some writing. And I feel like that's kind of one of the things that I do. One of my early teachers in Chicago was like, when you make somebody laugh, they're open. Their mouth is open, their heart is open, and then you can reach in and get at something hopefully deeper. So yeah, that was for sure. Personally, that was the worst thing that happened to me. But now, like I said, years later, it's like now I have this other thing that's come from it. It's a little bit odd too, because the TV show is about me meeting this Hollywood woman, because the show is called Telling LA, and the theme is, how did you get to LA? So there's one person on the TV show who lives in LA, one is from Ireland, and she came here. And me, I followed a Hollywood sort of starlet out here, it's the friends of mine who haven't seen me for a long time, like, oh, I hope you're okay. I didn't know you get divorced. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, no, that was years ago. Yeah,
could have used that phone call 15 years ago.
Yes, it would have helped if you called me back then. Yes, for sure. So yeah, that was kind of, and also as an author, just dealing with the constant rejection. For some reason, as an actor, I couldn't handle it, but as an author, I can. So I have 4 children's books out, and all of them, I'm the most rejected author I've ever met. And, and it's just kind of like, okay, how do you keep going when people are saying no? To even now trying to think about getting some TV shows made, like, it's ridiculous to think that it's even possible. And I've heard no now for the last 3 years in every different way.
I think that's written on the crest of Los Angeles.
Right?
On the city.
For sure.
It's in Latin, but.
City of no, yeah. Ciudad de no.
It's been great. I've been thrilled to have the opportunity to be in the room with producers talking about turning my solo shows into TV shows. Mm-hmm. But what happens, a lot of times, the most recent example was they were very excited about making a kids' TV show with some animation at the end, and me as like the modern day Mr. Rogers.
Nice.
What does a modern day Latino Mr. Rogers look like? And we had 6 months of meetings, and we got to the point where he's like, okay, here's the animation crew, here's the budget, this is when we're going to start shooting, this is where it's going to air. And and I was like, wow, what do we do now? He says, you talk to your agent tomorrow morning. And I'm like, okay, great. And I talked to my agent, and he said, this is a home run, this is fantastic. And never heard from the guy again.
He ghosted you.
Totally, I got ghosted. Ghosted. And it was, and it turns out that that's more common than not, but I'd never experienced that close to a success.
Oh, it's brutal.
And, one of my friends said, who knows what actually happened, and part of it is like, where's the, so it's, I've learned to just be like, to say yes, and if it actually happens and the check actually clears and I actually see it on the thing, then that's great.
Yeah. That's a weird kind of like dichotomy of LA. It's like, here's this thing and all of your dreams are going to come true. It's not going to, but it absolutely could if it happened, which it's not going to.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And, luckily I've had people along the path that have helped guide me. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that this one of my dear friends is telling me, these meetings get canceled all the time. Just because you have a meeting doesn't mean it's going to happen. And that's happened to me many times. Mm-hmm. And so, I in some ways, I have this wonderful career of telling stories to kids and telling stories to adults that is fine. I'm never going to be rich with it, but I can feed the family, and we're fine with it. So it's just sort of like a bonus thing. Like, oh, maybe this happens, maybe this doesn't. So that's been interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there ever anything that you feel like